The following Conscious Consumer Network recording of a live broadcast is available to purchase in high definition at ethymarket.com. Support free and independent media by becoming a CCN pledger. For €10 a month, you can have unlimited access to CCN high definition downloads at ethymarket.com. Ethymarket, the ethical marketplace for conscious consumers.
Television is not the truth. Television is a goddamn amusement park. Television is a circus, a carnival, a traveling troupe of acrobats, storytellers, dancers, singers, jugglers, sideshow freaks, lion tamers, and football players. We're in the boredom-killing business. So turn off your television sets. Turn them off now. Turn them off right now. Turn them off and leave them off. Turn them off right in the middle of the sentence I'm speaking to you now. Turn them off.
Stop them. An idea whose time has come cannot be stopped by any army.
Welcome to TLBTV. And of course, as everybody should know by now, this is brought to you by the good graces and the ingenuity of Conscious Consumer Network. Today our show is The Middle East Rising. So before I bring our guest in, let me tell you a little bit about Middle East Rising and how the Liberty Beacon Project is involved with this. So let's get started. Isolation, apartheid, genocide, or just plain murder, all a part of the daily life of the average Palestinian, and not much better off is the life of the average Syrian, Iraqi, Afghani, or Libyan, being filled with the horror of not knowing who will launch the next missile, drone strike, or drop the next bomb on them. And the majority of the world, quite frankly, appears to not really give a damn, or ignores the situation out of the warped mindset that if they are not consciously aware, if they are consciously aware, they must take responsibility. As usual, the Liberty Beacon Project steps forward with to rip the crowd, or to rip the veil away from the crowd and end the silence, okay? And this is a project named Middle East Rising. This is a website, radio shows, interactions designed to bring attention to the plight suffered and endured by a vast majority of citizens within this region, and force the eyes of the masses open, even if they have to be dragged in kicking and screaming. My special guest today is Ariyana Love. She is a writer, a researcher, an activist, an editor/facilitator of TLB's Middle East Rising website, a project initiated to give a voice to those who have been denied one for so long and to make the truth known. Ariyana was introduced to myself in the Liberty Beacon Project in September of 2013. After receiving a scholarship from Academy of Art University to research and gather materials for a documentary film, she decided to live in a small village of the West Bank of Palestine, studying Palestinian culture, the Israeli military occupation, and the unique olive oil cultivation and harvest in Palestine. After about 8 months in the West Bank, she then lived another 4 months in Jordan, studying the Palestinian refugee crisis. Not really intending to be drawn into the Syrian plight, she met a Syrian doctor who had fled Syria under life-threatening circumstances. He had paid a month's salary to be led by a regime taxi driver through 12 checkpoints, both regime and FSA, to get to Lebanon and then to Jordan. He opened her eyes to the Syrian genocide. At that time, there was about 12,000 Syrian refugees crossing every week into Jordan. The Syrian doctor volunteered as Ariyana's translator, accompanying her as she spoke with Syrian refugees, both those who had been in UN camps and those who were freely walking the streets of Jordan. Every one of the refugees had a profound story, and what she learned from the Syrian people was both astonishing astonishing and unexpected. So please join us as we discuss the reality of those who suffer the daily dangers and trials of life in this troubled region. Our hope is to open your eyes to this monumental suffering and injustice. Welcome to the Liberty Beacon Project's Middle East Rising. And again, our guest is Ariyana Love, the facilitator of this project in every way, shape, or form, and an outstanding humanitarian. How are you this evening, Ariyana?
Oh, I'm just fine, Roger. Thank you for that introduction.
Well, we believe in telling the truth, and the truth is that you are an excellent humanitarian. But I'd like to give you a few minutes just to talk about what woke you up to the issues in the Middle East. Now, we gave a little bit of that in the forward, the intro, but it always sounds better, and we always get the best details coming straight from the horse's mouth. Not that you're a horse, but you understand what I mean. And for anybody who doesn't know, Ariyana and I are very good friends. She is one of our biggest project leaders and a facilitator of activism. Ariyana also lives in Finland presently. So you're getting a broadcast from Holland, a guest from Finland, and little old me right in the middle of northern Montana, central US of A. So please give us an intro, and then let's get into a discussion, because there's so much I'd like to talk about this evening.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell it like it is.
Oh, gee.
I have that. Yeah, I have that kind of personality. My father says that I'm a what you see is what you get kind of a person. Well, the truth is that I was having visions of Palestine years before I even knew what I was seeing in my visions. And these visions came in dreams, they came in meditation. So also during the waking mode of the brain. Anyway, so when something like that happens, it piqued my curiosity. And I wondered where that was, because it also seemed to be a different time. It was like, the old part of Jerusalem. And I had met a friend, actually through destiny, a woman who was she's Palestinian, and she was engaged to my ex-husband after we divorced. Needless to say, they never married, but they were engaged for 8 years. And after they separated, she and I became close friends. And she told me things about Palestine. This was the first thing that opened my eyes. And when she sent me postcards of Jerusalem, I almost fell out of my chair, because that was the place. That was the place I was seeing so then I knew, all right, one day I'm going to go there. I didn't know how, didn't know why, but I just set that aside. And later, in the end of 2012, I became aware of the Israeli war crimes in Palestine and the bombing. There was, in November of 2012, it was Operation, what do they call it? Pillar of Defense or something like this. And it was more like Operation Genocide. And I was able to watch this unfolding and happening on Facebook, and people were reporting the news, Palestinians especially, were acting as citizens journalists, because mainstream media refuses to represent them as human beings. So this angered me. It angered me very much, and a fire lit inside of me, and it was like a raging anger, and it was something I never experienced before with something outside myself, something that didn't have to do with, say, my childhood or my relationship with my parents or something like this. It had to do with humanity. It had to do with something outside myself. And I think that was how this calling awakened inside me. And this fire has been burning, like raging every day since. So what I do with that, and what I have done over the past 3 years, is research every single day and read up on the history of the region, read up on what is Zionism. And I have to say, it took me 3 years just to understand the concept of Zionism. What is Zionism? It was not easy. So anyway, that's my story right there.
Well, I've got to tell you, we've done radio shows together. We've had some excellent guests on, Marian Assisi, and several other guests,
Nico Pelid.
Miko Peliot, and again, another outstanding individual. But this is an Israeli, okay? An Israeli from a fortunate family, a family of power, okay? His father was a general in the Israeli Defense Forces.
And his grandfather was one of the founding fathers who signed Israel's Declaration of Independence.
And so what we have here is an individual speaking out against the injustice, speaking out about the plight of the Palestinians, speaking out about everything that goes on in the area, within that area of the Middle East, and it's something that when you first find out that this is an Israeli of stature, and then you hear him talk. And it surprises quite a few people. That was an outstanding interview. But you and I, over the last year plus, have gone through some really good interviews, and you have written some excellent articles. We need to discuss the issues of Palestine, probably more so than anything else. If you wish to touch on the Syrian issue, that's fine, or any other part of the Middle East. But I'd like to focus a little bit, or actually a majority of this conversation, on the Palestinian plight. Because what we are looking at in Palestine is an imprisoned people who literally are locked into a smaller and smaller landmass as time goes along. You have put out in several articles, as well as I have, the 4 or 5 different pictures of Israel over time and the amount of Palestinian versus Israeli territory. And what you see is that the Palestinian territory has shrunk to basically about 10 or 15% of what it was, say, in the late 1940s. And so you have a massive...
We're at 22% now.
Okay, so you have a massive population locked into a very small area, which is being deprived of just about any of the necessities of life, medical care. You try to bring in one of these freedom flotillas that, go to Palestine to bring food, to bring medical supplies, so on and so forth. And of course, they're intercepted. They're not allowed in. I mean, what we're seeing...
Not only that, they're arrested and tortured and threatened and you name it. Yeah. So
we're seeing an entire society, okay,
an
entire society, or an entire culture that is locked down, being persecuted, and genocide is being performed on them. Now we look at the disparity between the amount of Israelis that are killed as a result of what would be Palestinians, and the amount of Palestinians that are killed over time as a result of Israeli actions. And what we see is a huge disparity. Anybody in Palestine who rises up is considered a terrorist, okay? But if you stop and consider that even the United Nations states that any nation that is under the auspice of genocide, or a society that is imprisoned, has the right to push back. Okay, none of this is being recognized, and a lot of this is virtually being ignored in the United States because we don't hear enough of it. Well, when you stop to think that a vast majority of the media is owned by what you would term the Zionist, as well as what I would term the Zionist, we can see that we're not going to be fed a lot of the truth from this region. So it is through projects like Middle East Rising and people like Ariyana Love that we get the truth as to what is going on, and you go right to the people and ask the questions. These aren't things you're guessing at, are they?
Mm-mm.
So
No.
why don't we talk a little bit about the plight of the Palestinians as you see it right now? And let's go over just the last year or so of the attacks on Palestine, the ambulances being attacked and blown away by tanks, the hospitals being bombed, private homes being bombed, homes being bulldozed down. Let us hear that from your perspective.
Well, there are so many crimes being committed by the Israeli. Okay, well, let's define what is Israel first of all, because what we have is, you mentioned the media. There are systematically Zionists. Now, in order to understand Palestine and in the issue of Palestine, you need to know what Zionism is, and I encourage everybody to research it. But basically, the elitists of our world are Zionists, and that's something to know. They're usually bankers and Zionists. But the Israel was created by the elitist Zionists, because they needed a nation, they needed an army, a powerful military, in order to enforce the New World Order. This is something that we all need to understand. So where the previous Zionist headquarters were in Scotland, they're now in Israel or in Palestine. Israel actually is not a state. The United Nations does not have the authority to grant statehood. So they're still in an illegal state of being. I mean, not state, because they're not a state. But what Israel is a military occupation, and that's what it was always intended to be. Back in the beginning of this establishing of Israel, well, something important to understand. This is just a little bit of background information. The transfer agreement was a contract signed by Hitler and the Rothschilds. Rothschilds are Zionists. And they signed this contract agreeing to transfer the Jews of Germany and Europe to Palestine prior to any Holocaust. Okay, so it was all a setup in order to create a homeland for the Jews. All right, so the Jews, in essence, are pawns in the game too. They're being used just like everybody else. And the truth is that Zionism is anti-Jewish, it's anti-Christian, it's anti-Islam.
But why do so many people, especially in places like the United States, when you say Zionists, people immediately feel that you're talking about Jews? There are a lot of Zionists that aren't Jewish. There are even Christian Zionists in the world.
Right. But the majority of Zionists probably are Jews, or they consider themselves Jews. Actually, I don't know. Considering the amount of Christian Zionists,
yes,
that's a really good question.
Right.
Maybe because those at the top have a Jewish lineage.
Could very well be.
Meaning the elite, the bankers, or whatever you want to call them, the elites.
The money changers, yes.
They typically are Jewish Zionist, is what they would call themselves. So since they're leading the show of genocide, I guess that's why. Well, and also they created this homeland for Jews, which is Israel. And a lot of Jewish people, they got swept up in that because they didn't have a homeland, and they came through terrible times in Germany, and they lost everything that they owned and their homes and everything. And so they wanted to hold on to something. And it was a fantasy. And now the reality is in front of us. And basically last summer, when Israel was bombing Gaza, the true colors of this government, if you will, this regime became clear to everybody, because it was so atrocious. The war crimes, I mean, when I even think about it, I get emotional and I start to. It was so atrocious. I mean, you can imagine bombing entire families in their homes, entire families, wiping out entire lineages, 87 entire families just obliterated from the face of the earth. Now, if that's not genocide, why should we be shy about calling that genocide? I mean, we've got to get our heads screwed on. We have been programmed to use a false language to describe the reality. So And it's, this programming comes through the media. And basically, systematically, the Zionists have bought up all of the global media. 96% of the global media is now owned by 6 corporations, which are Jewish Zionist owned. And their agenda is to protect the image of Israel in the media, and to brainwash, because it's programming. It's this repetition like a script. And the truth is that the Israeli regime is the most dangerous on the planet. And in fact, if their crimes are so, people could not imagine what they're doing. I mean, it's beyond people's comprehension. And I hope that I can try to paint the picture in realistic terms what it is. And what I have been doing over these past 3 years is training myself to use a truthful language, the truthful narrative, creating a truthful narrative where it didn't even exist, and representing the Palestinian people in a just way. They're human beings. They're not animals, they're not terrorists.
When you talk about it, okay, it's such a different narrative, and it has to be, okay. Yeah. It's a truthful narrative, because growing up, or say about 20 or 30 years ago, when we started to hear things along this line, okay, it was always, okay, the Israeli point of view, that Israel was constantly under attack, that Israel was constantly in danger due to the terrorism perpetrated by the Palestinians. We never really understood the huge disparity. As I said, if you have 50 Jews killed, and I don't even want to use the word Jews, even though a huge majority of Israel is Jewish, okay? And I'm not talking about the Palestinian citizens. I'm talking about the Jewish portion, is Jewish. But let's say if 50 Israelis are killed, 3,000 Palestinians are killed. Palestinians don't have tanks. Okay, they don't have multiple rocket launchers. They don't have F-16s to drop bombs and shoot missiles. They don't have drones. They don't have, and I could go on and on and on. Okay, they have a few men.
Stones.
Stand
they have stones
and throw stones, or maybe a couple of guns. Okay, here and there. To say that the Palestinians who've been forced into 20% of the landmass that they had 60 years ago, okay, and basically imprisoned in these small sections of landmass, literally imprisoned and walled off into these sections, okay, are living a life that most people in America cannot comprehend. They're living in bombed out cities. They're living in cities where ambulance drivers fear for their lives, because there is no in most war zones and civilized areas of the world, if an ambulance goes down the street, you don't shoot at an ambulance, okay? In Palestine, you get a tank round right into that ambulance. They don't give a damn whether or not that ambulance is there trying to save lives, whatever. It doesn't matter, okay? Emergency responders killed, ambulances blown up, shot at, bombed, journalists captured, tortured, killed, families, whole families wiped off the face of the earth. If you have a Palestinian protest against Israeli occupation or Israeli whatever, okay, genocide, then the next thing they know, there is a bulldozer the size of a house coming down the street, and it will literally knock their house to the ground. And if there's anybody in it, I really don't think they care. What is going on is not known in America by a vast majority of this country. All they know is what they are told. But this is a pattern, okay, of what's going on in America. We don't know what's going on in Sudan right now. We don't know what's going on in Ukraine, with exception of the little bit that they tell us. Americans are so ignorant. We are the most ignorant society on the planet when it comes to what's going on outside of the United States of America. And that is intentional. But why is it intentional? Because we perpetrate most of that evil. Now, how does that connect with Israel? We give Israel billions upon billions, more than any other nation on the planet. Israel is the 30th most prosperous nation on the planet. And I believe I'm close to that. It's either 30, 31, somewhere like that. But yet they get the highest level of aid monetarily from this country, and a vast majority of that goes straight into weapons. And there's a lot of money pumped into weapon systems in Israel that aren't even on that. This is what we give Israel every single year. So we are arming the Israeli army with jets, with aircraft, with helicopters, with missiles, with tanks, and a lot of that comes from us, the United States. And if you think that our government is not totally aware of what's going on, this is just one more incidence of the tyranny that's being committed against the American people by keeping us ignorant. You want to know why so many Americans will stand up for Israel? Because they have been brainwashed to do that. But more and more every day, Americans are waking up to what is actually going on. And part of the reason is projects like Middle East Rising. So what part of this do I have wrong?
You don't have any part of that wrong. And I really do hope that I'm making a difference. I would love to focus more on the entire Middle East, and there's many places that are suffering, but I don't have a staff yet. And
this is all coming.
This what's happening in Palestine is all consuming. I can barely keep up with it. There are so many human rights violations happening every day, and they oftentimes are just not reported at all. And when they are, it's independent news agencies. And what the mainstream media is doing with the issue of Palestine is they're trying to put two equal sides side by side with each other.
They're not equal.
And you got Israel, and they're not equal. You've got an abuser, an occupier, a military occupation on a native population, entire civilization of people. Can you imagine an entire civilization of people?
Hold on 1 second. Can I imagine? Okay, you are American born and raised. Do you remember what happened to the Native Americans, the American Indian?
Exactly.
Isn't this a repeat?
It's exactly
what happened in America.
Absolutely, except there were 100 million Native Americans killed, and what they're doing in Palestine is slow genocide. It's systematic crimes over time, so that if they don't, and they're taught to do this. The IDF, the Israeli, the occupation forces, the military are trained so as where to shoot to disable someone, and they want to put bullets in people, but not to kill them because that will gain too much attention. I mean, they are taught exactly what to do, but what we have right now going on in Palestine is really, really, really serious. And the people have had enough. The people themselves are rising up. They're taking to the streets. They're doing what they know how to do, and that is hurl stones at Jeeps. I want to try to explain, when you hear the word in the media, clashes, this is extremely misleading. They're not clashes because, again, that's the two equal side scenario they're trying to program into us. No, what is happening is that you've got 22% of the Palestinian land still remaining. Palestinians, half the population are refugees living outside of Palestine. They fled, and at different periods of times, and when there were different pogroms of genocide. And on the 22% of land that's still remaining, the Palestinians are trapped and caged in. They cannot come and go freely. They have to get permission from the Israeli authorities for everything. Okay. I lost my train of thought.
Well, I would tell you that you have been getting the word out. You have, but I want to touch on something else, and
Okay.
I'm hoping that you're willing to talk about this. As a matter of fact, you published some information about this not too long ago. Do you foresee another round of assaults on the Palestinians in the very near future?
Do you
Is
mean in Gaza?
Israel gearing up, right, for another assault on Gaza?
Yes, they absolutely are. When is the question, and when are they planning to do it? I got inside information from a news agency in Ramallah that this recent uprising, or intifada, as it's called, that is the translation of uprising, intifada. I mean, of intifada is uprising.
Yeah.
It was instigated by Hamas. And it could have been the death of the settler couple in the West Bank, who were actually terrorists. I mean, one of them was a Secret Service agent, and he was there in the occupied Palestinian territory spying on Palestinians. Okay, territory they don't belong. First of all, the settlements are illegal, and that could have been the thing that could have been Hamas. Who knows? But they didn't claim responsibility. They usually do. Last summer when I was watching Hamas behavior, they were almost impeccable. They didn't lie. They were forthright. They told, they reported the truth. They gave warning before they fired rockets into the, occupied territories. In case there's civilians, and the Israeli government can warn them. So, I mean, this is the reason why Hamas was removed from the terror list, the EU terror list, just after last summer. It was in September. Okay, so these are really big things. But you have, Palestinian population on the 22% of their land, and they are now fed up and pushing back and rising up. And, it's...
But you've got to...
that Israel wants to bomb Gaza, wanted to do it so soon. I think that they were preparing to do it maybe at least after another year or two, and to do a big one. And this would be, the
straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, perhaps. But if Hamas is initiating it earlier, and if it really was Hamas, that is actually positive news. That means that they have capabilities that Israel doesn't know about. I know last summer, the Israeli authorities were completely shocked when they saw, Al-Qassam, the resistance. Al-Qassam is a military wing of Hamas and their resistance movement. When they saw these resistance fighters, freedom fighters, popping up, all across Palestine, all across occupied Palestine, all across Israel, whatever you want to call that part of the territory. They were popping up everywhere, and it shocked them. They didn't know they had these capabilities, and it scared a lot of people too. And so, nobody knows the capabilities of the Palestinian resistance in Gaza now after getting assistance from Iran. And it's a really good thing that they did get that assistance too, because they have a right to resist this occupation. That's everybody's right.
Oh, yes, they do. But we're talking about the Palestinians have had enough and they're rising up. What I need to say, and I want to know if you agree with this, is that you're still looking at one of the most powerful military forces on the planet. Okay, when you talk about Israel, okay, they have an extremely powerful military, whether it's air force, whether it's ground forces, whether it's mechanized forces. One of the definitely the most powerful military in that region. So even if the Palestinians decide we've had enough and they decide to push back, it is literally like David standing against Goliath. Okay, if we don't awaken enough people in the world to literally back the Palestinian people, to say this is enough, this has to stop, isn't it just plain suicide for the Palestinians?
No. And there's no Palestinian that would ever think like that. And I'll tell you why. Because of the Quran. You to know the mindset of the Palestinians, they will never surrender. They will never give up. They live with death every day. Okay,
Yes,
they
they
have
do.
nothing to lose, and they know what is prophesied. Okay, whether you believe in it or not, a lot of people do. And it's written, in the Quran what is going to happen. And the truth is that what the Quran says is that when there is a third intifada, it is the Third World War, and it starts in that region. And a great army is formed. There's many things that go on, and it's worth reading about the Quran. You can know the mindset of the Palestinian people very well because they follow the Quran. And the Israeli state will fall. That is its destiny. It's written. It's logical. If you are good with mathematics and advanced mathematics, you're going to know it's inevitable. But even the Rothschilds who created the Israeli state, they knew that it was not going to be permanent. They know that it cannot be sustained forever. They don't care. They just wanted to get the job done, which is to enforce the New World Order. And the New World Order is their plan. Also,
Well, you're saying, and I agree with you, that we could very well be on the verge of World War III, and that it is going to start in the Middle East. Okay, and we've been talking about this for at least 2 generations that I can remember. Okay, what we're looking at right now is the influx into Syria of Russian aircraft, Russian ground troops, Russian mechanized weapons of war, also backed by Chinese aircraft, Chinese weapons of war, so on and so forth, and boots on the ground from Iran. You're talking about a coalition of 3 nations that together, 2 of the what would be considered superpowers, China and Russia, and Iran, which has a very large body of military individuals that can quickly move into the Syrian area, and they have been invited in by Damascus, by Assad. Okay, now we have President Obama stating in a national release couple of days ago that we are going to be putting American troops or boots on the ground in Syria. We were not invited. The Russians were invited. We're talking about an inevitable clash. And here we can use the word clash when we're talking about US and their allies versus Russia and their allies in Syria. Do you foresee this as the inevitable trigger in that region for World War III? Because I see it as one of the most explosive situations. We are sitting on a razor's edge right now, and World War III is right on the other side of that fence.
Well,
that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you talk with any Muslim in the world, they're going to tell you that's, if you read the Quran, you're going to know these things are spelled out.
Yes.
Step by step by step, they're spelled out and written in the Quran. I mean, that's what's so incredible about it.
It's not just the Quran, though. A lot of these things are also protected in the Bible.
Yes, they are. And yeah, that's the area. That's the area where World War III breaks out.
And right now, again, we're sitting on the razor's edge. We have a combination of the 3 superpowers, military superpowers on this planet, Russia, China, and the US, and obviously their NATO allies, all focused within the same region. Now, we know, okay, in the Liberty Beacon Project, and I'm sure you know, well, you're part of the Liberty Beacon Project, but you are a project unto yourself because you cover a region of the planet that nobody else or very few other people wish to cover or cover truthfully. We understand okay, that people are getting absolutely sick and tired of the war on terror that the United States has funded, has trained, has supplied such organizations as Al-Qaeda, as ISIS, and what are quote unquote the freedom fighters in Syria, which a lot of them are affiliated with terrorist organizations. I'm going to be the first one to tell you, because I can see it on your face already. I know Assad is not a benevolent leader. I know what he has done to his people. I know what type of a leader he was and the terror a lot of his people lived under. What is not being discussed is the sovereignty of the nation. And what we aren't discussing is how many people across this planet are looking at what's about to happen in Syria, and the world doesn't want to see another Libya, where one nation, the United States and its allies, NATO, go in and bomb Syria back to the Stone Age, because we're not just talking about hurting Assad here. We're talking about destroying an entire infrastructure. Libya was one of the most prosperous and had the highest standard of living in that portion of Africa. They were a very prosperous nation. Once the United States bombed them back into the Stone Age, these people live in abject poverty today. And what the world doesn't want to see is another Libya, another Iraq, another Afghanistan. Okay? So what we're looking at here is the Russians coming in to prevent this. And I believe that's exactly why they are there. How do you see the sparks going off in the Middle East?
Well, Syria is already a third world nation.
Yes.
The job is done. They're bombed to the Stone Ages. Okay. Half of the population, according to the latest UN report. Okay. And it is valuable. We need to read those reports. Because they're on the ground collecting data. And, the only thing that the UN does is tends to underplay the numbers.
Really?
Okay?
No.
Yeah. But otherwise they're reporting what's going on, and we have to read those reports. Anyway, Syria was a second world nation before 5 years ago, before the uprising, and now it's a third world nation. And half of the population has been displaced out of their homes. The majority of the reason for that, and people may not like to hear it, but it's the truth, is Bashar's use of barrel bombs. These are illegal, and he's been doing it since day one of the uprising, massacring people, bombing out houses. And these are barrels that are, packed with illegal substances that shoot out sideways and cut off limbs and do more damage and cause more casualties. Okay. And this has been ongoing for the past 5 years. And, the UN also said that for every one person that ISIS kills, Assad regime kills 7 more Syrian people. So we need to understand that the Assad regime is doing genocide against the Syrian people. And there is an agenda going on in Syria, and it is secular. Don't believe when the media says it's not a secular war. It's absolutely secular. The thing that motivates the people to do what they're doing is secularism. So, but we have to understand that. And the reason why they say it's not secular is because they don't want us to learn. They don't want us to find out for ourselves. What is secularism? What does it mean in that region? Well, what are the sects? Bashar comes from an Alawite clan. I mean, from the Alawites. There's 2 million Alawites in Syria. They're a minority. And, nothing against the Alawites, but the Assad clan is a very filthy clan. They're in bed with Israel, and Bashar's first cousin is just got busted for doing financial dealings with top Israeli officials. So, I mean, we have to get these blinders off of our eyes. We have to start calling a spade a spade. The Assad regime Look, the U.S. does not want to overthrow Assad, and they never. Maybe down the road, I don't know. I don't really know the plan, but I go by the actions, which speak louder than words, because the words are the mainstream media, and that's just boggling our minds. Back in 2012, Putin tried to negotiate a regime change. Okay, he brought in Ahtisaari, the former Finnish president, who came in as the mediator, the moderator,
Negotiator. Yep.
Negotiator. Yeah, and the United States said no. If they wanted regime change, if they really wanted to oust Bashar, that was their opportunity. But they didn't. Why? Maybe because genocide is big business. When Putin did that, only 7,500 people had been killed. 7,500 Syrian civilians had been killed at that point. Putin knew what the Assad regime was going to do, and he tried to avoid it. And for that, I can respect the man. You know, he's has some very interesting moves, very clever, very intelligent. But, I mean, I don't like that he's in Syria right now, but I understand his position. I mean, but when you're bombing, civilians are being killed. That's a fact. And we have to face that. And bombing's not good for anybody.
What are your opinions on, because right now, one of the biggest pluses in his cap, and I'm talking about Putin, is the fact that the United States, for well over a year, actually since it started right around 2012, but really has heated up over the last 18 months, the war against ISIS, the war against Al-Qaeda. And what we saw was that the United States made very little headway, okay, in both Iraq and in Syria in taking care of ISIS and taking care of Al-Qaeda. In comes Putin, and within 2 weeks, he's got these people on the run. Okay, this is what the world is looking at. So Putin is basically making a fool out of the United States. And he is saying, I have been invited in by the legitimate government of this country. You have not. But yet the United States says, we're putting boots on the ground. We're not going to be going up against Syrian forces, American forces. Those American forces will be squaring off against Russian forces. This is the catalyst for World War III.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, we've got a few minutes left, about 10 minutes, and I would like you to put out any information or any stories that you've gone over recently. And I'd like to refocus back on the Palestinians.
Yeah.
I have a great picture of you in the article that accompanies this show promotion, of you sitting in a doorway. It looks like a doorway that's got to be literally thousands of years old.
1600, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your personal experiences in Palestine, your personal experiences in Israel. What you've been there, you've lived there. Okay, for someone like me to say what I think and I feel, that's exactly what it is. This is what I think and what I feel, but it's not what I know as a result of being there, experiencing it, talking to these people. Now you've done that. You've talked to these people. What are their hopes? What are their wishes? How much hate is there for the average Israeli, not the Israeli military or the Israeli elite? What do you see as far as the culture in Palestine?
They're the most hospitable people, some of the most hospitable people I ever met. Maybe the most hospitable and welcoming. They have an amazing culture. It would take years to study it. The way that the families interact with each other, and they have order, and they follow Islam. They really do. They are a perfect example of Islam today. I mean, I don't think there's any other country in the Middle East that follows Islam like the Palestinians do.
You mean not the corrupted version we're told about in the United States, which isn't Islam at all?
Right. And I learned everything that I know about Islam from the Palestinians. So many people told me what's written in the Quran and gave me leads that I could, then research. But it was the human to human, to hear it from them and to take in their understanding was most valuable. And I think I got the right knowledge about Islam. So for that, I'm really grateful. I see the Palestinian people as, okay, first of all, my connection to Palestine is more to the land, more to the fact that this is a holy place, and that the land itself vibrates, from the footprints of the prophets, who walked there. And there are many, many sacred places and very ancient historic sites that belong to all of us, that belong to the whole planet. And we should want to and feel the responsibility to protect these holy places. So that's where I come from. But the Palestinian people, I love them. And to me, they're mostly saintly people. They're like saints. There's so many saints among them. They're so close to Islam. They pray, and they'll never flaunt it or show it. But when they're praying, you'll feel something. You'll feel the vibrations. Or if they pray for you, it's powerful. And you know that these are deep spiritual people. And, they are pushed also into this. It's partly because of the Quran, partly because of the prophet. This is the land of the prophets, but also they've been squeezed into this. They've been forced to become even better human beings because they're living close with death. And when you're close with death, like that, close to death,
Every
you
day.
surrender everything that any attachment you have to this world, you can let it go. And so they're great teachers to the rest of the world, what they have endured. But they know also that the third intifada is the end, and it's the end of the state of Israel too. I mean, this is what everyone needs to understand. This does involve all of us. But I would really like to talk about a few minutes just to talk about what's happening in Palestine right now, and
Please do.
Give some examples to people so they can get the get what's going on there. Okay, over the past 1 month, Israel has arrested 800 children, and this is a phenomenal number. We've never seen this before. Basically, usually the average amount of kids that are arrested per year is about 800 kids. So they did this in 1 month. So this is extremely excessive force. And these children are tortured. I mean, the fact of arresting a child is torture. It is so traumatic for the child and so frightening that what they experience and go through. They're usually taken to remote places where nobody's told where they are. They're tortured. They're put on the floor they're beaten. You name it. And many of them are sexually assaulted. So there is and this is part of the torture. Then they're placed in administrative detention, and they're literally put into prisons for indefinite periods of time, where they're further tortured, where they're put into solitary confinement. These are children, and you have children as young as 8 years old enduring this. It's a way of trying to get the population to submit.
Yes.
Right. Now, Israel has just changed their laws. Basically, every decision that's made is made by the ministry, which is at the highest level of the Israeli government. So like when they were bombing Gaza and, committing war crimes and atrocities there, everything that was being done basically was being ordered from the top. So we need to understand this, that how that society works. And I can give an example of a 13-year-old. Oh, first I wanted to say that Israel has changed their policy, changed their laws, that now they can shoot to kill Palestinians if they look suspicious. If there's a suspicion, and they use that wording. Okay, so this is what they're doing now is extrajudicial executions. Okay, they're shooting kids at point blank range. Anybody they want to. There's no discipline with the Israeli soldiers. They're pretty much given free rein. There's no there's no punishment if they commit a crime. And in fact, the Israeli ministry will lie for them. What they're saying now is that Palestinians are attacking Jews or the Israelis with knives. Okay, but the majority of those incidents, deaths of Palestinians, they're have been proven to be false, that these are lies. These are lies made up by the ministry. There was a report done by Euromed Monitor. So this is the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor. They did a press conference at Geneva. They studied 8 cases that were in the media where Israel accused the Palestinian of attacking someone, a Jewish or Israeli or a soldier. And in many of those cases, they were seen and caught on camera planting knives. Okay, and the Israeli soldiers worked together with the settlers. So since this uprising has happened, Israeli settlers have gone out in mobs, and they're terrorizing the Palestinians. They're breaking into their homes. They're, assaulting, killing. They're running after Palestinians, and all they have to do is shout to a police officer, "He's a terrorist. He had a knife. Kill him. Shoot him." And the police and the Israeli, the armed forces are responding by shooting and executing Palestinians. And then what they do is the settler comes and brings a knife, and then they plant it. And this is caught on camera. And there's reports about this. So what you're hearing in the media about, the majority of the deaths of Palestinians, they're completely innocent. That's a fact.
Okay, we're down to about 3 minutes here.
Okay.
Real quickly, okay?
Yeah.
Tell me, how does this tie into what's going on in Jerusalem right now and the restrictions and that are being set up by Israel in Jerusalem?
It all focuses on Al-Aqsa Mosque, the most sacred site for Muslims, the most holy site in all of Palestine. It is, human beings have the right to practice their religion under international law, and that's all what the Palestinians are doing. But Israel basically controls that area with soldiers, and they allow settlers to go in and storm the mosque to perform their rituals there, which very much are very. And they desecrate the area. The Israeli government's been digging underneath the mosque. They want to build Solomon's temple. They claim that their ancient temple is there, although they've been digging all around and they haven't found any proof of a temple. So they're going to demolish, the intention is to demolish Al-Aqsa Mosque. So, but this is the thing that upsets the Palestinians the most. This is the thing that will stimulate a third intifada, if nothing else. That,
Yeah, that is definitely a key flashpoint.
That's their sacred holy site, and these people are people of Allah. They call themselves people of Allah, of God, people of Allah, and they pride themselves in that. And what they cling to is Islam. And you don't go messing with their right to pray. They'll die for that. Absolutely,
their right to pray and their right to exist.
And their right to exist.
Okay, well, I've got to tell you, I've been dying to do a show with you on CCN for a while, and we had technical difficulties last week, so I apologize we didn't get this show on. And I'm glad we did. And going forward, there is going to be more media from Middle East Rising, the project, and we've already talked about you and another gentleman who represents Great Britain starting a European version of the Liberty Beacon Project, as well as you doing some media, some weekly media for Middle East Rising. And I think all of this is great, and this will all be coming probably around the first of the year. I want to tell you how much we appreciate you being here, Ariyana. You're always a pleasure to talk to, and I really appreciate so much the effort you've put in, and thank you for being here.
Can I say something real quick? I almost forgot to mention the campaign. We're doing a 3-week campaign. We've already done 1 week. We have 2 more weeks left to get the United Nations to send an international protection force to Palestine. And you can follow us at on 4Pal Kids. It's the number 4Pal Kids on that website, or on CWN. It's Citizens World News. You can find us on Twitter and on Facebook, or you can message me if you want more information.
All right. Well, again, this is something I'm sure we're going to be promoting a whole lot more as time goes on. and it might even be something we do a radio show on this week. But I want to thank you again for being here. And I want to tell everybody out there, you need to pay some attention to Conscious Consumer Network. If it wasn't for networks like CCN, we wouldn't have the forum to get our message out to you. And we so appreciate Conscious Consumer Network and everybody involved in it. They work very hard to allow us to have a platform to put this information out. And we want to thank everybody for watching, and thank you again, Ariyana, for being here. And we'll talk to you all again next week.
The pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world should be the focus of every person on our planet. The reason it is not is because people are kept distracted by the illusions and deceit propagated by the corporately controlled mainstream media. In recent years, the rise in truly informed, savvy researchers and journalists who have all taken to the air in various capacities has given rise to a new genre of media. We have seen the explosion of truly free and independent media, and thus the need to create an ethical live broadcast network that facilitated these brave and tireless souls became apparent. With a great amount of research and meticulous planning, Conscious Consumer Network was created. CCN is a first-of-its-kind broadcast network that is specifically dedicated to free and independent media with absolutely no government control, corporate sponsorship, or advertising. The live broadcast network runs full-time with an average of 25 shows and live broadcasts a week. The high-definition live stream is free to view and is accessible from any computer terminal with online access, including laptops, tablets, smartphones, and smart TVs. All shows are archived onto YouTube and are freely available to view in order to educate and inform as many as we can without imposing monetary limitations. CCN was successfully launched on the 1st of January 2015 and has gone from strength to strength as we have improved and increased the capacities and functionalities of the network, as well as an ever-rotating and improving lineup of content which is broadcast daily. CCN is blessed to be the home of some of the hardest-hitting, most cutting-edge, truly educational and informative materials. Catch interviews, reviews, and talk shows from the many different and beautiful perspectives from CCN's family of interviewers and broadcasters. Since the 1st of January 2015, we have produced over 800 shows. We have over 2 million YouTube minutes watched every month, and we have an average of 1 million hits a day on CCN's website. CCN is viewed in over 147 different countries and hosts broadcasters from 5 different continents. The time has now come to generate funding to keep CCN on the air for the duration of 2016. The total sum needed to continue broadcasting for 2016 is $60,000. This budget includes the replacement of computer equipment, the acquisition of secure servers, which are most needed as we keep getting hacked, plus the renewal of the broadcast license fee for 2016. This is a fraction of the annual budget used by mainstream media networks producing a similar quantity of content. This is what makes CCN so successful, unique, and accessible, is the ability to run a project of this size and reach on such minimal resources. CCN does not claim ownership over any of the material we produce and broadcast, as we firmly believe that information is the common heritage of all beings, and thus CCN belongs to you, the public, and it is up to you all to keep CCN going. CCN would like to thank those who have contributed to the network in the past with resources, content, information, time, and energy. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.